The Morrison Formation is a sequence of sedimentary rock in North America. While bones had been found in the rocks for millennia, excavation ramped up during the Bone Wars, leading to the identification of many dinosaurs. In fact, most dinosaurs that people think of come from this or the late Cretaceous Hell Creek Formation. While about 75% of the formation is buried, it covers 1.5 million square kilometers across the states of New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, both Dakotas, a small bit in Oklahoma and Texas, and the Canadian territories of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. This mix of sandstone, siltstone, mudstone, and limestone was laid down during the Late Jurassic period. It separates into the lower and upper parts of the formation, and then each into the lower and upper members. While it has long been established that it crossed the Kimmeridgian and Tithonian stages, it has been debated whether it also crossed into the Oxfordian. Recent uranium-lead analyses radiometrically date the formation from around 146.8 to 156.3 million years ago, putting the base into the latest of the Oxfordian stage. The Earth was, of course, very different from today during this time. The four corners of the United States was about 345 miles south of where it is now, and the continent was rotated more clockwise. The Morrison Formation was located in the continental interior, with the Palaeo-Pacific Ocean coast to the west. Today the Pacific and North American plates are moving in the same direction, but in the Jurassic they were pressing together, with the Pacific plate being subducted underneath the North American plate. This created uplifts on the west coast and a series of volcanic eruptive events during the laying down of the formation. These uplifts are where most of the sediment of the formation came from. The high ground would cause cloud to condense, creating rain. This would feed channels into the continental interior, creating a depositional basin. The climate was far warmer. Climate models have been used with CO2 levels equal to modern pre-industrial levels, up to 11 times that. But a level that produces data that best agrees with the geological data is 4 times pre-industrial levels. It predicted a winter surface temperature of 20 degrees Celsius and 40 to 45 degrees Celsius for the summer. This would vary slightly between north and south. The annual rainfall would have been less than 500 millimeters. For context, this is less than a quarter of the annual rainfall for Kenya. This semi-arid condition was created by the uplifted areas creating a kind of rain shadow, where all the moisture is taken out of the air by mountains before it can reach the low-lying areas. While this is supported by preserved oxygen isotope values, much of the water would return to the interior through water channels as the rain travelled downslope. Most of the current Morrison Formation was a wide alluvial plain built on sediment carried to the interior by streams and occasional floodwaters. There were also several wetlands and lakes fed by various rivers carrying water from the uplands. So what plants were there in this environment? Well, we have unusually few examples in the fossil record, normally bits of leaf and twig. This points to relatively sparse vegetation with few large woody plants that would have survived and preserved well. The environment was similar to a savanna, dry with few trees. There was no grass, so the plains would have been dominated by low-lying herbaceous plants and shrubs. Some of these would have been familiar, such as cycads, but others not so much. The extinct cycad-like cycadioids and Zeckanauskia, which left leaf mats whenever the weather grew particularly inhospitable and they shed their leaves to enter a dormant state. Most, however, would have been ferns, hence my naming of these plains, fern savanna. Around the streams and wetlands, things would have looked very different. Here the larger plants could take root and grow with a reliable source of water. You would have seen the conifers and larger tree ferns creating gallery forests, growing up to 20 or 30 metres high, judging by the size of some fossilised logs. These were not modern conifers, but mostly an extinct genus called Brachyphyllum. The shade provided by these plants would have maintained the soil moisture, so there would have been a dense understory of all the plants on the plains and some others like ginkgos and horsetails. Moving from the flora to the fauna, there is, again, little evidence of invertebrates apart from gastropods, bivalves, and other shelled mollusks. The presence of burrows showed that they were there, but the strong currents and floodwaters probably prevented them from being preserved. In looking into the vertebrate record from the Morrison Formation, I'm going to be using 2 main sources. The Palaeoecological analysis by John Foster from 2003, as it's the most comprehensive, and Dragons on the Landscape by James Farlow & Co. from 2022, as it has the most up-to-date information. I'm going to be switching between these two frequently, but I will have the source that I am using in the bottom right, as not all the numbers will be comparable. The paleoecological analysis has a record of individuals. Many of the smaller animals have a possible range, so I took the average. 1% of individuals are frogs, 11% are fish, 18% turtles, 13% mammals, far and away the most diverse group in the formation. Then you have 2 snakes, just some jawbones but demonstrating that snakes' 4-legged relatives might have been here. Then there are 5% lizards, sphenodonts, squamates, and the cristoderid Steniogenes. 7% were crocodilians, and 1% pterosaurs. The remaining 43% of individuals in the Morrison Formation were dinosaurs. Even if we split this up, the multi-ton sauropods dominate the population, and carnivorous theropods are only beaten by mammals and turtles. Looking closer at just the dinosaurs, we have 20% theropod, 54% sauropod, and 13% each for the Ornithischians, the Thyreophorans, and the Ornithopods. We will take a quick look at those first. The Ornithopods in this formation had a fun time with classification, having Othnielia and Drinker abandoned, leaving only Nanosaurus. There is also Dryosaurus, and the most common Camptosaurus, with the remainder unidentified. The Thyreophorans show a starker picture, with Stegosaurus making up 91% of the numbers, leaving only 9% to the early Nodosaurs, Gargoyleosaurus and Mimora pelta. Based on the data that we have on Morrison Formation quarries, 36% of them were deposited in fluvial streams. 48% were from the plains or areas of floodplain. The rest are fairly evenly split between floodplains that include swampy areas, high floodplains, ponds, channel-filled ponds, large ponds and lakes, and sandy banks. Ornithopods lived in most environments, but when you compare their spread to the quarry data, leaving aside the quarries with an unknown paleo-environment, ornithopods seem to have preferred streams, stream-fed ponds, and swampy areas. The Thyreophorans preferred the streams even more, although it should be remembered that this is mostly Stegosaurus. Although there are only 7 nodosaurs with a known paleo-environment, they seem to have preferred the lakes and ponds. The theropods have been touched on in previous videos. Their numbers were dominated by 70% Allosaurus, 131 individuals. This is based on the conservative numbers from Dragons on the Landscape. They chose to exclude the Cleveland Lloyd dinosaur quarry numbers to prevent the data being skewed. Adding in the numbers from that quarry, including its 46 Allosaurus, increased the number to 177, 73% of theropods. Adding in the 6 genera of crocodilians as one group still does not topple Allosaurus as the most populous carnivore. When we take Allosaurus out of the picture, we see significant populations of Ceratosaurus, Torvosaurus, and Silurus. In looking into how these carnivores lived and how Allosaurus dominated, the paleo-environments could hold the answer. What we see is a huge percentage of non-allosaurs being found around fluvial streams. Torvosaurus has the highest with 80%, leaving out those from unknown quarries. Some of each were found in the more open floodplain, but this could be because it was the most common environment. Silurus has an unusually high percentage found among channel-filled ponds, and Ceratosaurus appears to be the most diverse. All of these are far from representative of the quarry environment, but how do these compare against the top predator? Allosaurus environmental distribution looks more like the general quarry distribution. Every environment is present except for sandy banks, leaning more to the open floodplain. It is this environment that the Cleveland Lloyd quarry and its 46 individuals come in. If we remove these, we get a slight shift of the most populated environment to fluvial streams, but the overall similarity to the quarry distribution remains. So while Allosaurus seemingly was present in the areas that other theropods lived, it was far more wide-ranging than the others. Smaller theropods could move through the trees and the undergrowth around water sources easily. They did not need to be particularly large to prey on Nanosaurus, Dryosaurus, or baby sauropods. The larger prey in these areas would have to contend with Ceratosaurus, Torvosaurus, and Allosaurus. It has been proposed that these former were more low and flexible to move through the dense gallery forests, and that Ceratosaurus may have been more capable than other theropods of turning to aquatic prey if large herbivorous dinosaurs were absent. The Morrison Formation seems to have favoured the preservation of large bones resistant to being broken up by flowing waters. There are numerous corrections that can be run, but some show ornithopods being the most numerous dinosaurs, making up 50% of individuals. Even if this was the case, they were not the most impactful. You can see how difficult the weights of large extinct animals are to calculate in my Kimmeridgian video, but using polynomial calculations, a medium-sized Dryosaurus would weigh about 104 kilograms, and a large Camptosaurus, the most common ornithopod, could weigh up to 2 tons. This was outweighed by the more numerous Stegosaurus, up to 3.3 tons. This may seem odd for the arid landscape of the Morrison, but multi-ton elephants and rhinos also live on savannas in Africa. What was unusual though was the size of the biggest, most diverse and probably most numerous herbivores, the sauropods. One of the smallest adult sauropods in the formation, Haplocanthosaurus, could have weighed 15.5 tons each. Brachiosaurus, the tallest animal in the area, could have been 28.7 tons. There was also Supersaurus, a contender for longest land animal ever, a possible 36.8 tons. But there are two that top the scales, both super heavy species of common sauropods, Apatosaurus ajax and Camarasaurus supremus, both around 42 tons each, almost the weight of a fully loaded HGV lorry. It is also worth noting that the bias against preservation of small ornithopods also affects young sauropods. These massive animals had a high birth rate for their size, and very few young are found, even though there would probably have been a large young sauropod population. While savannas do support some large mammals, the number and scale of these dinosaur herbivores is unusual for a semi-arid environment with low nutrient plants. The sauropods had several advantages, however. With their long necks, they could forage easily, covering a wide area with little effort. Their method of swallowing rather than chewing would also have made eating faster. And then there was the effect that their size had on the food that they ate. Large animals can more efficiently digest low nutrient food. A sauropod's gut would have been able to extract a lot from what they ate. Sauropods in the Morrison Formation were the most diverse of the dinosaur groups. They decreased competition with each other by evolving different types of teeth, adapted for different types of plants. This allowed several sauropods to coexist and even forage together in the same environment. As these feeding niches would have been broadly separated by teeth, let's look at those that we find in the Morrison Formation. First, there is the unknown, where we have no skull and no clear-cut feeding type from close relatives. The most common of these is Haplocanthosaurus, with 9 specimens. A head for this animal has not been found, and although recent analyses have placed it closer to the diplodocioids, we really don't know what types of food it ate. We have one Schwazia, one Dystrophaeus, one Marapunisaurus, and 13 unidentifiable individuals. In the high browsing category, there are 9 specimens of Brachiosaurus. It had spoon-shaped teeth in an arrangement that could let the stems of woody twigs through the gaps while scraping off leaves like pine needles, or gripping leafy branches to break off. Of the Brachiosaurus finds with an identifiable environment, 83% were close to streams where the gallery forests and large conifers were. In the generalist category, you had the most common genus, Camarasaurus, with 207 individuals found. Camarasaurus had teeth similar to Brachiosaurus, but arranged to be cutters. It could chop through the twigs of trees within its reach, and snip shrubs and low ferns too. This seemed to work well with Camarasaurus spread all over the formation and in most environments. Then there were the low browsers. 132 specimens of Diplodocus, 14 of Barosaurus, although the limbs of some of the former may belong to the latter, 113 Apatosaurus, 8 closely related Brontosaurus, 3 Gallimiopus, 2 Supersaurus, and 1 Catadocus. All of these are diplodocids, and the 25 unidentified diplodocids should fit here too. These had peg-like teeth. The diplodocids would close their mouths over the ferns or shrubs they were feeding off and pull back. The stems would pass through the teeth while the leaves would be stripped off and swallowed. Although these low browsers existed in every environment, they seem to have preferred streams. This means 5% of sauropods had an unknown feeding type. 2%, made up entirely of Brachiosaurus, were high browsers. A large 38% were the generalist Camarasaurus, and a huge 55% were various low-browsing diplodocids. While one genus making up 38% is impressive, generalists tend to do well in stressed environments as they can make do and adapt more easily. The sheer diversity of diplodocids is initially surprising, but ferns and shrubs would have been the most common vegetation, present in every environment, and quick to regrow. The slight differences in adaptations would have slightly partitioned the genera. For example, let's look at the two most common, Diplodocus and Apatosaurus. Diplodocus had the longer neck, enabling it to snake deeper among trees and over ponds and waterways. Apatosaurus had the more flexible neck, allowing it to reach higher and strip ginkgo branches and tree ferns. I've been talking about the environment of the Morrison Formation like it was one unchanging place, but it was around for over 9 million years and underwent some significant changes. The Foster analysis creates 6 stratigraphic zones, helpfully numbered. Only 74% of dinosaurs can be assigned to a zone, but crossing this with the paleogeographic maps created by Christine Turner and Fred Peterson will give us a flavour of how the environment and the animals changed. Towards the beginning of the Morrison Formation, around the early Kimmeridgian and stratigraphic zone 1, the inland basin was very different. A huge swath was covered by the Late Jurassic Western Interior Seaway. This created sand dunes, an expanse of plain to the south and east, and several evaporite basins. The water from the seaway would often fill areas that got cut off from the main body of water, leaving standing salt water. In the intense heat, the water would evaporate, producing a surface of salt. Around the seaway, the water table would have been high, leading to an environment of trees and lush plants that would later be found along the streams. In this zone, we have the fewest quarries and only 19 dinosaur individuals. If we look at the groups, it looks very different from the majority of the Morrison Formation, with 50% of the population being theropods. Of the 4 that could be identified, 3 were Allosaurus and 1 was Torosaurus. If this is representative, these large theropods would have had to hunt a variety of prey other than dinosaurs at this time. Of the 5 sauropods, again only 3 are identifiable, Haplocanthosaurus and Dystrophaeus, 2 relatively small sauropods, very unlike the giants that would come later. All identifiable thyreophorans are Stegosaurus, and the only ornithopod is a Dryosaurus. This is the only time in the formation that thyreophorans significantly outnumber ornithopods. By the middle Kimmeridgian, the seaway had greatly retreated, leaving a wide alluvial plain. This was crisscrossed by streams, carrying material from the rising land on the west coast. This river system was braided, switching back and forth across the plain. Individual streams were intermittent, as the water would change course upstream. Wetlands and lakes formed in the southeast, where the low land met the water table, and while the environment remained dry, there was seasonal rain. This corresponds with stratigraphic zone 2, where we see more familiar Morrison Formation fauna. Haplocanthosaurus was still around, but it was joined by Brachiosaurus and the movers and shakers, Diplodocus and Camarasaurus. Allosaurus maintained its dominance, but you have the appearance of the smaller theropods like Silurus. The ornithopods diversify, Nanosaurus joining Dryosaurus, but Camptosaurus becoming the most common. They ventured out onto the alluvial plain with the stegosaurs. The idea that these alert ornithopods and heavily armed thyreophorans benefited from each other's company might have been a simple consequence of these two groups often living in the same spaces in significant numbers, rather than active mutualism. In the late Kimmeridgian, the uplift had slowed, so there was less material flowing through the streams. This allowed them to cut straighter into the alluvial plain. There was still some blocking and overflowing of the streams, but this was caused by build-ups of volcanic ash from the more active volcanoes. The spotted lakes and wetlands persisted in the southeast, and there was an interesting feature called Lake Teuditchi in the southwest. This lake is actually an alkaline-saline wetland lacustrine complex, a grouping of wetlands and lakes that regularly filled with water. Volcanic ash would collect in the complex, making it alkaline and salty. In the heat, this standing water would not last long and eventually evaporate, leaving a surface of alkali salt and volcanic tuff. Meanwhile, the continuing retreat of the seaway caused the growth of coal swamps and marshes on its margins. This stage of the formation encompasses the 3 small zones of 3, 4 and 5. There is a lot more data as zones 4 and 5 have the most quarries assigned to them. Possibly due to the amount of lakes and streams providing sources of water, the sauropods dominate, making up more than 50% of the dinosaur population. The diplodocids also increase, making up over 60% of sauropods in zones 4 and 5, and introducing the massive species Diplodocus halorum and Supersaurus viviani in zone 4. The Thyreophorans and Ornithopods keep similar percentages with each other, although the most common ornithopod changes from Nanosaurus in zone 3 to Dryosaurus in zone 4 to Camptosaurus in zone 5. The percentage of Allosaurus drops in these zones, with more small theropods and Ceratosaurus probably taking advantage of the wetlands. But in zone 5 there are the two specimens of Saurophaganax, an allosaurid and probable sauropod killer on the plain. The early Tithonian seems to show a tipping point when gradual cooling began to have a significant effect. The complete retreat of the seaway left marshes and swamplands in the northwest, in what is now Canada and Montana. The change from dry semi-arid to humid semi-arid increased the prevalence of large plants in the formation. There was still a wide alluvial plain with some streams crossing it, but much of the paleo environment is poorly known, hence all the question marks. From zone 6, the biggest change is in the proportion of ornithopods. The majority of these were the small Nanosaurus, which would have fared better in swampy undergrowth. All known Thyreophorans are Stegosaurus, and there are only 3 sauropod genera: Diplodocids Diplodocus and Apatosaurus and Camarasaurus. Allosaurus was back on top with only one other theropod, Coparion. Identified from a single tooth, it is the oldest known troodontid. It's important as it demonstrates that there were para-avian dinosaurs at the time of Archaeopteryx, strengthening the relationship between non-avian and avian dinosaurs. This is the last we see of the Morrison Formation, as less deposition and later erosion closed the geological record on this extraordinary environment. One aspect to consider is the high concentrated mortality in this formation, with 67% of the dinosaur quarries containing several different dinosaur genera. It seems that the depositional basin, with all of its hardships, was able to sustain a thriving environment. But, as with modern savannas, there would have been periods of extended drought. This would have concentrated animals around waterholes and intermittent streams. When those went dry, things would have gotten very difficult. The uplands would have offered a possible refuge with more reliable sources of water for those who could reach it. There is evidence that sauropods could move great distances when necessary with their long strides. Dinosaurs that lived close to the streams, like Brachiosaurus, could follow the dry stream beds into the uplands, feeding on the drying vegetation as they went until they found water. And there is possible evidence from a Camarasaurid foot of digging for groundwater, which would not have evaporated away and provided much needed relief during a drought. Unfortunately, dinosaurs were not as neurologically equipped as modern mammals to adapt their behaviour and synthesize a solution to hardships. Unlike elephants, which use their experience and knowledge of past droughts to make decisions to find water, analysis of a Brachiosaurid brain case indicates that sauropods possessed restricted behavioural flexibility. After seeking out a few known reliable sources of water, a sauropod probably had very few options left. Analysis of Allosaurus brain morphology indicates that they were not much better. With the drying up of more perennial streams and waterholes, many dinosaurs that knew these areas and relied on them during droughts would have died. Despite this, the Morrison Formation preserves an amazing ecosystem that sustained an unusual and incredible environment of adversity with some of the largest land animals that ever walked the planet. Normal in late Jurassic North America was huge, and while sauropods would reach larger sizes, their dominance and diversity would never again reach this height. Thanks for watching. This hiatus has been caused by multiple work and life changes, but I should be able to get back to making more than one video a year. I had a lot of data left on the Morrison Formation and wanted to get it out there as I'm planning on leaving the Jurassic for a bit, apart from maybe a short or two. I think that some other sauropods in particular deserve a look in before I go back to talk about Apatosaurus and Brontosaurus. I also hope that you like the references. I'll carry on with this as it causes me to check myself, reminds me where I got certain details from, and turns these videos into the kind of quality referenced essays I always wanted them to be. As always, like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell if you want to be notified about posts due to my part-time production pace. I would like to thank my patrons, and particularly my genus level, Arachobia, Dracano, Miss Neb Savage, Liam Mackin, and Big Red Dinosaur. In addition to early access and credits, I'm also planning some Patreon-only videos. See you next time.